Hi, I'm Dr. Arnel Aganala from Point Loma Nazarene University. I'm a professor of kinesiology here in the Department of Kinesiology in the College of Health Science. I'm also the director of the Biomechanics Lab. It's a state-of-the-art biomechanics lab that we opened up earlier in 2024 in partnership with the San Diego Padres. The main focus of the lab is to analyze the kinematics and kinetics of baseball pitching, hitting, and fielding. However, we're more than just a baseball lab. Although that is our focus, we also look at walking gait, running gait, counter movement jumps. We had soccer players in here, volleyball players. The lab itself is equipped with 28 specialized motion capture cameras that you can kind of see behind me in front of the command center, and that's what allows us to three-dimensionally analyze the movements of the athletes that come into our lab. The great thing about this facility, it's a state-of-the-art facility because it's one of a kind, particularly for a Division II NCAA institution such as Point Loma. All of our undergrad and graduate students have access to the lab. So they could come in here, they can collect data, analyze data, but more importantly, present the research here locally or in national conferences and be on the forefront of biomechanics research. So view the rest of this video to learn more about the science of biomechanics. Hi, I'm Dr. Arnel Aganala from Point Loma Nazarene University, and in this video we'll explore the science of biomechanics. I'll briefly define what exactly biomechanics is, mainly in the context of human movement. Then I'll explore some of the ways that we use biomechanics to analyze athletic movements such as jumping, baseball pitching, baseball hitting. And that'll segue nicely to a sneak peek that I have for you on our biomechanics lab here on the campus of PLNU. Now, you might have seen this drawing before. This is Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. Oops, let me keep that PC. It's actually based on an old architect guide known as De Architectura, which was written by a Roman architect and engineer by the name of Vitruvius between the years 30 and 15 BC. While it focused on architecture, it actually also explored the human body, mainly the geometry of perfect proportions. This appealed to Leonardo's interest in anatomy and inspired this drawing that you see here. Now, if we explore biomechanics, I'd first like to start off on how biomechanics is valuable and how we live it every day in our lives, particularly when we're looking at human movement. And I think this video summarizes very nicely how valuable biomechanics is. So let's check this out.
What is biomechanics? It's the story of us, how we move through the world, forward, backward, up and down, under and over. It's a story about technology, science, music, medicine, sports, and art. It's written in equations, steps, rotations, collisions, code, and sweat. It's full of setbacks and successes. Biomechanics is a story built on the past, informed by the present, and envisioning our future for a better world in motion. We tell this story so that no matter how we move, we're always moving forward.
That was great, right? So simply put, biomechanics is a study of movement of living things using the science of mechanics. And mechanics is just another word for classical physics. If you've taken physics before, it's what's known as Newtonian physics, or physics as defined by Newton's 3 laws of motion. And biomechanics explores the interaction of a living system, a plant, a dog, or human, with the world around us, right? With what's known as external forces. Biomechanics, in the context of human movement, is the applications of physics to human movement. So there are two branches of mechanics. If you've taken physics before, you might have learned these terms. The terms like statics, which is studies of systems in a state of equilibrium. This is a system at rest or moving at a constant velocity. Whereas dynamics is a study of systems in a state of accelerating or changing motion, right? So I thought Dwayne Knudsen, in his Fundamentals of Biomechanics book, he explained nicely, biomechanics provides the conceptual and mathematical tools that are necessary for understanding how living things move and how kinesiology professionals might improve movement or make movement safer. So if you plan to be, or if you are a kinesiology professional, such as an athletic trainer, a physical therapist, occupational therapist, orthopedic surgeon, physician assistant, or a coach, right, or PE teacher, you are using biomechanics in some shape or form, right? Whether you're quantifying, making an evaluation, hopefully improving someone's athletic performance or reducing their risk of injury, this is where biomechanics comes into play. So there's a lot of overlap between biomechanics and some of the other sciences relevant to kinesiology, such as exercise physiology, motor control and learning, pedagogy, if you're a teacher or a coach, and psychosocial. So biomechanics helps us understand more objectively, because we're using quantitative mechanics here in analyzing human movement, whether it's walking, running, throwing a baseball, throwing a football, etc. So one example I always like to use is gait analysis, or the study of walking. So we apply the principles of mechanics, mainly statics and dynamics, to human movement, capture the three-dimensional movement, and then make some assessments right here. So I use this flowchart quite a bit. We're applying the principles of mechanics into some form of human movement, and then we describe what's known as the kinetics and kinematics of human movement, what's known as movement biomechanics. And so it gives us a three-dimensional view of what biomechanics of human movements is. So someone walking, we have their kinematics, which is their geometry of motion. And then through all of this other technology that we have available to us, we could apply or understand the interaction between external forces and the movement that we see here. So why study biomechanics? Because we're quantifying something, quantifying human movement in this case, we are able to provide an objective evaluation of human function or human performance. This allows us to identify causes of injury, analyze athletic performance, and potentially evaluate the effectiveness of rehabilitation techniques, as well as coaching techniques. So as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of career or vocational options available that utilize biomechanics. I mentioned PTs, OTs, and physical therapist assistants, athletic trainers, even athletes and coaches, sports medicine specialists are all individuals whose career is focused on some aspects of biomechanics. One of the initiatives that started probably about 5 or 6 years ago, this is in 2018, 2019, is the National Biomechanics Day initiative. And if you scan this QR code, if you're watching this video, this will take you directly to their website. And the idea behind NBD, National Biomechanics Day, is to promote the science to mainly high school students. And I remember in high school, I don't recall learning about biomechanics. I learned about other STEM fields such as physics, calculus, biology, chemistry, you name it. But biomechanics is almost like the lost young brother that no one's never heard of. So this NBD initiative is intended or aimed to promote the science. And as of this recording of this video in 2024, biomechanics this initiative has reached over 45,000 students already. And it's beginning to bear the fruit of our labor that we've had the last few years. So I'm very excited. Our lab here at Point Loma participates in National Biomechanics Day every spring, where we invite high school students from local schools in our community, and they get hands-on observations and experience using all the tools that we have in our lab. Here's just some of the examples that we've done over the years. So we invite them to come check out our lab. This is a grad student who gave an example of how we calibrate our system, of our motion capture system and our instrument and mount, which I'll describe later in this video. So really cool stuff. So biomechanical analysis typically involves analyzing human movement from two perspectives. One, as I mentioned earlier, is kinematics, which is the geometry of movement, geometry of joint motion. These are terms like angular displacement, angular velocity, angular acceleration. That's the first thing we see. That's the first thing that we are quantifying when we're analyzing someone moving. Now, the forces and torques that cause or change the movement that we see is known as kinetics. So we typically approach analyzing the biomechanics of human movement from both kinematic and kinetic perspectives. So I like this diagram here, this flow chart that shows you the interrelationships between biology, when we're talking about the musculoskeletal system and the nervous system, as well as physics. As I mentioned earlier, mechanics involves statics and dynamics, and biomechanics is, in a way, an interdisciplinary field where we're merging these sciences together to quantify and objectively evaluate human movement. And it's all based on, as I mentioned earlier, Newton's first, second, and third law. And in this video, I'm not going to go into detail, but just know that we use first, second, and third law, the law of inertia, acceleration, and action-reaction to quantify and analyze the interaction between all these forces and torques and the system or the human body itself. So when we're talking about human movement, there's really three or maybe two main sources, I should say, of external forces that affect joint movement and segment movements of the body. Obviously muscles, right? You might have taken muscle physiology or anatomy, so you know about muscular contractions and how they rotate the joints. So they're all interacting with gravity, 9.81 meters per second squared, right? That's acceleration and gravity. So biomechanics, in a nutshell, if I had to simplify it, is all about understanding the interaction of all our body parts when they move, when we contract our muscles, and gravity. Now there are things like friction, for example, and viscosity, which go beyond the scope of this video. But for the most part, we're looking at the interaction between all our muscles and gravity. And that helps us understand various human movements and various athletic movements, such as running or cutting. Here I have a picture of female soccer players, which if you know anything about soccer, especially female athletes, they tend to have a higher risk of knee injuries for a myriad of reasons, but one of the modifiable risk factors is the biomechanics of the knee, what's known as the knee valgus or knee valgus torque. So we can use biomechanics to understand athletic performance, but it's also been used to look at various applications of physical therapy, looking at rehabilitation techniques, look at prosthetics and orthotics, yoga, Pilates. So many of you plan to be physical therapists, so it's used quite a bit. So all physical therapists that are working in the field have a really good understanding of biomechanics and how to quantify that and how to use that to make informed decisions on their patients. Okay, we're going to shift gears just a little bit and now focus on how we use biomechanics to analyze the jump, or what's known as the counter movement jump. Research has shown that counter movement jump performance is a significant predictor of performance on the field or court, whether you're a basketball, volleyball, soccer player. So we use jumping analysis quite a bit. And one of the simple tools is this app. There are a bunch of apps out there, but this is an app that I've been using for years. It's called My Jump. It's really cool stuff. It's really easy to use. And you're looking at a counter movement jump, the hands on the hips. You have the person do, jump as high as they can, and you film them with an iPhone. And then in the recording, you indicate the frames in which the person takes off and in which they land. What that does, using just some simple math, some simple physics, straightforward physics, using flight time relationships, we can then estimate how high the person jumped, the power at which jump, as well as the velocity and forces involved. It's really simple to use. We use it quite a bit. As I mentioned, it is a significant predictor of athletic performance. So using tools such as My Jump or Vertical Jump, it's called MyVert, there's a bunch of apps out there, we can get a pretty good assessment as part of a battery of tests on our athletes. Now, taking it even a step further, there are other tools in the lab that we can use to analyze the counter movement jump or a squat jump. This is a force platform. This is something that pretty much almost every biomechanics lab has on their floor or in their mound, or using various tools that are like a treadmill, for example, may have instrumented force plates in there. So a force plate directly measures what's known as the ground reaction force. Remember Newton's third law, for every action there's equal and opposite reaction. So what the force platform measures is that GRF, that ground reaction force. And then it's the ground reaction force along with your weight that influences the acceleration of your center of gravity, or the jumper's center of gravity. So here's an example of an athlete in our lab that's doing a counter movement jump. And what you see here in the top right graph is the vertical component of the ground reaction force. The graph on the bottom is the acceleration of the center of gravity. So this is a nice illustration of Newton's second law, which is the law of acceleration, that if the system, in this case the jumper, is either accelerating or decelerating, that means there is a net external force that's non-zero that's causing that acceleration. There's a direct linear relationship between net force and the acceleration of the center of gravity. So this is an example. I'll go ahead and play this real quick. Doing a counter movement jump, you can see the jumper first accelerates in a negative direction, then slows down as it comes down, and it speeds up going back up. It is now airborne and then lands. That all happens within 3 seconds. I'm just going to pause it real quick so we can go over the curve here. I'm just going to use the vertical component of the ground reaction force. I don't know if you could see my mouse. So in this first part, now keep in mind, I should preface this by saying that the detailed analysis of the counter movement jump is beyond the scope of this video. I have a separate video on that, but I do kind of want to explain the interactions between all our muscles and gravity. So the person standing there, this is in the first, half a second or so. You can see here that the net force is equal. It's actually, the net force is actually zero because the ground reaction force is equal to the person's weight. Then the person accelerates in a negative direction. That's why it just kind of dips here. And notice the acceleration of this person's gravity comes down here. So what's interesting here is that as the person slows down, the ground reaction, the vertical ground reaction force is positive. It's actually slowing. It's always positive, but it's slowing the person's center of gravity as he or she is approaching the ground. And then the second part here, and this is actually the absorption phase, but after the absorption phase, this is the takeoff or acceleration phase. Now the person has the same positive acceleration, if you will, but now the person is speeding up. And that's speed up, that accelerates center of gravity above 9.81 meters per second squared, so the person takes off. And in this case, let me show you this. You can see ground reaction force is zero, obviously, and therefore acceleration is equal to negative 9.81 meters per second squared. And then the person lands. You have this impact force, what's called a heel strike or transient force, which a force platform can detect and measure. And then the person slows down as it comes down to the ground. all of that to say is that all is facilitated by the muscles, what's called the triple extension muscles of the lower half. So these are muscles that extend the hip, extend the knee, and plantar flex the ankle. Again, I'm not going to go into details of what's happening there from a muscle contraction perspective, but know that there's eccentric contraction of these muscles when the center of gravity is slowing down, and concentric contraction when the center of gravity is accelerating or speeding up. Okay? So this is just some of the ways that we use our tools that we have available to us in our lab. Really cool stuff. This is actually a jump roper, which is, very similar, just cyclic loading or jumping. You can see the ground reaction force for both the left and right side, as well as the acceleration of the center of gravity as this jumper performs this multiple jump roping exercise. So it's really cool. Okay, now let's talk about baseball. And what better way to talk about baseball by introducing you to our relatively new biomechanics lab on the campus, on our Balboa regional campus at Point Loma Nazarene University. Now, early 2023, we entered in an agreement with the San Diego Padres, which is a Major League Baseball organization in San Diego, to build this state-of-the-art facility at PLNU. It's a great partnership in a sense that the Padres were looking to build a biomechanics lab. If you watch baseball, you know at the Major League Baseball level, a number of organizations across the league have similar types of biomechanics labs. They're mainly internal. We're one of 2 organizations that have this type of partnerships. We're definitely, as far as I know, the only Division II, NCAA Division II university that has a state-of-the-art biomechanics lab that partner up with a Major League Baseball organization. So fast forward to early 2024, we had our official grand opening. This is Eric Grepner, who is the CEO of the San Diego Padres, that came to our facility, and we had a ribbon cutting ceremony here at the lab. And the lab is, as you can imagine, it has all the toys that you can think of, all the biomechanics toys that we have available to us today. It has both marker-based and markerless motion capture. There are, I mentioned earlier that this is an instrumented mount. So it's a regulation mount instrumented with force platforms on the drive side by the rubber, underneath the rubber, as well as down the slope of the mound. There are 3 total force platforms. And then on the hitting side, we call this the back cave. This back cave has 4 force platforms on both sides of home plate. And the entire facility and the entire lab has 3 separate motion capture volumes, each with markerless and marker-based cameras that are available to us that allows us to capture all of these movements, whether it's a baseball pitch or a baseball swing. We can go up to like 480 frames per second, which is really cool. So during our ceremony, we had members of the San Diego Padres organization, both players, coaches, and front office people, as well as members of the local community, and we had them pitch. We had members of our baseball team hit baseballs off a tee and off a pitching machine. You can see here we have hit tracks, which simulates where the ball would go when someone makes contact with the ball. So some really neat state-of-the-art cutting-edge technology that we have available to make analysis or to provide analysis, biomechanical analysis of baseball pitching, hitting, and fielding. However, we're more than just a baseball biomechanics lab. We can look at other movements such as I mentioned, our counter movement jump, or if you're interested in gait analysis, we do walking and running. In fact, we have graduate students in our program that are looking at a number of different activities other than baseball. We're looking at track and field running, cutting, or hurdling, for example. This is a hurdler that competes in our track and field team, on our track and field team at Point Loma. So this hurdler was looking at the differences between different stances or strikes, mid-foot strike and forefoot strike when they're jumping to over a hurdle. So we can take that information, fit a skeleton to their motion capture, and then measure the kinematics and kinetics. So this is a perfect example here. This is kinematics of the person's ankle joint or tail crural joint, and this is the ground reaction force. So we can use those that information, this data, to make an objective evaluation with this athlete, with their coach. And one of the things that we emphasize here at the Biomechanics Lab is that we're not experts specifically in a particular sport, but we are biomechanists. So we want to work with the coaches and the athletes and the athletic trainers to better understand these different specific movements through a biomechanical lens. So this is a picture currently of our graduate students in the program. All of our students who are in the MS Kinesiology program have the opportunity to work in the lab, either do research, to help out with services for the local community. So if you're, happen to be a Point Loma graduate, either a graduate student or an undergrad student, make contact with me, or if you're taking my class, I take my undergrad class, undergrad biomechanics labs, every semester to the Biomechanics Lab at Balboa Regional Campus, and you'll get an opportunity to get hands-on experience. We are evidence-based practice. We emphasize evidence-based practice, and that evidence part is gleaned off research, level 1, level 2, level 3 evidence that we perform in our lab. But more importantly, we disseminate the information, we disseminate the data by presenting at national and international conferences. Is just some examples of students over the years that presented at these conferences, such as the American Society of Biomechanics or the International Society of Biomechanics and Sports. We also publish in this area with peer-reviewed journals. So a big emphasis of what we do here in the lab is data-driven research, biomechanics-related research, and we provide all of these opportunities to our students who are interested in this space. We collaborate with a number of different institutions around the country: Wake Forest, Cal Poly SLO, Carolyn Jobe up in LA that work directly with the Dodgers and Angels, Driveline Baseball up in Washington and Arizona, CSU Sacramento, American Sports Medicine Institute in Alabama, as well as Auburn University. And so I've also sent students there. What I'm personally proud of is, kind of the legacy of the lab are all the alums that been through our program and worked in the lab are now working in this space as a sports biomechanist. You could see here, these are just a few of the organizations that hired our graduates, from Padres, Reds, Giants, Pirates, the Rays, even in the NBA, the Memphis Grizzlies, for example, and the Navy. So they all, because of their experience, they are able to, land jobs, really land a vocation in biomechanics, in sports biomechanics, which really was unheard of 10 years ago, or when I was coming out of grad school. So the opportunities for, young graduates such as yourself who may be interested in the space are, I don't want to say limitless, but they're certainly numerous that are out there. In fact, every winter I get calls from Major League Baseball organizations trying to recruit our students, and oftentimes I have to decline because I've run out of students, right? The supply is not meeting the demand at the moment. So if this is an area that you're interested in, you're very lucky because you have a lot of opportunities out there to work as a sports biomechanist for any of these teams or teams like this, or companies such as Nike or Brooks or Buari, Lululemon, you name it, because they have actual biomechanics labs at their R&D facilities.